Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 927 Southwest Willow Drive here in Beaverton. Sorry, let me re-say that. It is 927 Southwest Willow Creek Drive here in Beaverton. We're located at the front of the house. We are at the front left corner of the home. The cleanout sits right in front of the very last foundation bit before you hit the corner here and the fence line. 3-inch ABS. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water's running. Off we go. Pretty clean sewer line right out of the gate. Basically zero buildup, or grease buildup especially. My camera is upside down right now, if you didn't figure that out already. We're heading towards the driveway. I'm hoping I think we're going to turn before getting all the way on the other side of it. There's kind of a sunken spot in the driveway I was a little bit worried about there at first. All right, we're entering into some concrete pipe here. So this isn't necessarily affecting flow, but as we enter the concrete, you can see the drip stains going down the sidewall of the pipe. It also appears you have some root hairs coming through those, as far as I can tell. They're very small. Whether you've got roots there or not, those are so small they could theoretically be some kind of debris that got caught, but that is originating out of a crack or a hole in the side of the pipe, or at least stuck on it. But you've got multiples of those coming down the sidewalls. Those are cracks or pinholes that are allowing groundwater to seep into the sewer line. So as it sits right now, we have little to no settling going on, at least thus far. The concern is over time, if that pipe keeps allowing groundwater to seep in, and it really does depend on how aggressively that occurs, it can lead to slow but sure hydro erosion. It can soften the ground around the pipe. It can hydro erode dirt through those cracks. They're small enough, they may not be doing it aggressively, but the entire, even the mains this way, you've got groundwater seeping in all over the place. So from a flow standpoint, not something that's affecting functionality. My bigger concern is what's going to take place in that concrete pipe over time. The worry of settling, hydro erosion, not just to the line, which can lead to the line settling, but can also cause erosion issues to the ground around it and above the line. So anytime I've got your pipe needs to convey sewage from point A to point B and be watertight, those are the main things the sewer needs to do. The line is flowing well, it's conveying sewage from point A to point B. It's very unlikely you're losing much, if any, sewage out of the line. None of these cracks are gaping wide open. But under hydraulic pressure, because of all the weight and dirt around the ground, it gets saturated with water. That creates a hydraulic pressure, and it pushes it right through the pipe walls. So anyway, I am going to recommend an epoxy liner on this pipe, but just understand, as it sits right now, none of these issues are affecting flow. But you want to make sure you deal with this kind of stuff sooner rather than later, so you're not having to do this a more expensive way and or run the risk of potentially some kind of flow problem. I don't suspect any of those things are going to happen all of a sudden. It takes time, but it is something to keep in mind. But because the line is taking on groundwater pretty much throughout the entire length of concrete, I am going to recommend at the least you do an epoxy liner. My only concern is, being that you have a 3-inch access point, you'll have to verify with the liner company if they can get a liner down this diameter of cleanout. Sometimes you have to add in a larger cleanout in order to do that type of repair process. Alrighty, located the camera head successfully. So the line crosses the front yard toward the driveway, about middle of the yard where the line turns and shoots out to the street. And we're about 6 feet deep here. I did put a reference marking down. You'll see a green T out in the road, as long as the rain doesn't wash it away. As it sits right now, being that the concrete pipe flows well, again, the issues I'm talking about here with the water seeping through are not affecting flow. So in my opinion, digging this thing up right now, honestly, I think it's overkill and overly expensive. Much of this pipe is in the roadway. I think the liner is about the only thing that makes sense at this juncture. I think anything else is you're kind of overdoing it as it sits. Again, considering that what we have going on here is not something that's causing blockages right now. So the little stringy items here, they're very hard to tell. Could be roots. It could also be an old piece of dental floss that got stuck. I mean, you'd be amazed at kind of stringy stuff goes down lines. Being that that's about the only obvious thing I'm seeing there that even looks root-esque at all, it's hard to even call it a root right now. It could easily be some stringy item that went down line, got hung up in the rougher aggregate rock, and it's been gunked over the last 30 years and kind of has the appearance. If I haven't mentioned, I've cambered about 25,000 sewer lines in my 13 years of doing this. I've cambered thousands of roots. There's just not enough there to verify that's what it is. It's possible because there's a crack in the pipe wall. There is a weak point, but that's the only reason I would even start jumping to any conclusion that could be a root. Otherwise, roots generally display themselves in a pretty obvious fashion. So the one thing I don't know, just given how clean this line is, that whenever I see a line this clean, I always get a little bit concerned someone may have preemptively hydrojetted the line to clean it up and spiff it up for the sale. That's assuming there are more aggressive looking roots sitting here. But there are lots of households out there that live very clean and don't get buildup in their line, so it's kind of a hard call. As we sit here today, we have good flow all the way out to the main lateral, but I am recommending this concrete pipe here be updated to ensure the line remains that way. I would first and foremost look into an epoxy liner. It's a trenchless repair system, or almost trenchless. Sometimes you have to add a clean out in order to put the liner through. All right, getting a very similar depth here. The yard's built up a little higher than the road. The line doesn't tank off hard at all, so about 5 foot 8 inches deep here and about 6 feet deep. And this is, I am sitting directly, this were a shallower sewer line, they would have whacked the for sale sign post right through the top of this thing. It's directly underneath the for sale sign post where that transition is at. And after any repairs are done, I do recommend re-scoping the line to check the work, make sure everything looks good. If for some reason you ended up doing a dig style repair, it's very important to re-scope, and you want to do that when the trench is closed, or you're not going to catch any potential settling problems that may occur after burying the line. And from what I can tell here, this looks like 3-inch ABS, unless I see a transition joint right out of the gate here to 4-inch. That's hard to tell. It might actually be 4-inch right here. That looks a little bit like the line bells out there. It's so quick after you drop in, but if you get that vantage point right there, it looks like your 4-inch pipe right here. So as far as I can tell, you go from 3 to 4-inch immediately in front of the cleanout, and then that looks like likely 6-inch concrete. There is an oddity size of 5-inch concrete you'll get sometimes. Visually speaking, it's kind of tricky to tell the difference sometimes, but it looks like from what I can see there, visually looking at it, I think you've got a spot where you could add a 4-inch cleanout in right here in front of this current cleanout, where you're just digging up grass and dirt. Which certainly makes things easier. Right here, just eyeballing it, you're about 18 inches deep. Pretty shallow if you had to do so. Anyhow, good flow to the main lateral. Line's functioning just fine in that regard right now. Clean line with good flow. If it's not repaired, I recommend keeping an eye on it. I would re-scope at every 1 to 2 years to monitor things, to watch for progression. If you want to take advantage of a liner, you don't want to let a line sit for too long to where it wears out completely and settles on you. You'll either end up with a not so great result out of the liner, an ideal version of it, and or you lose the ability to do it in general if you get enough of that taking place. I don't think any of that stuff is going to happen all of a sudden, just considering many of those cracks have probably been there for a while, but it is a slow but sure process, so keep an eye on it if it doesn't get fixed.